I'm Julie Bartke with Session Update. It's an issue that tends to surface every few years, legalizing medical marijuana. Now, it did pass the legislature several years ago, but was vetoed by then Governor Tim Pawlenty. A news conference this morning put the issue back in the spotlight.
Hello, my name is Heather Ozzie, Heather-Azzi. I'm here on behalf of Minnesotans for Compassionate Care, a coalition of organizations, medical professionals, patients, and concerned citizens who are working to remove the threat of arrest and prosecution for patients using medical marijuana pursuant to the advice of their doctors. I would like to thank our legislators and patients for being here today, and thank you for being here as well. Minnesotans support medical marijuana by a significant majority in Minnesota. 2/3 of our voters feel that Governor Dayton should sign this medical marijuana bill when it hits his desk next year. I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. A poll conducted this month by Public Policy Polling found that nearly 2/3 of Minnesota voters support changing the law so that people with serious and terminal medical conditions can use medical marijuana with the advice of their doctor. That is what is proposed today, and we hope that is what patients and their families are finally going to get. Before you hear Representative Carly Melin and Representative Tom Hackbarth discuss the details of the proposal, I would like to give the floor to Joni Whiting, who will give you a first-hand account of why we have a need for this legislation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joni Whiting, Joniwhiting. I just need to put this here for 1 second. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here today so I can share my story, my family's story. More specifically here, I am here to tell you the story of my daughter, Stephanie, a hard worker, loving wife, and amazing mother of 3. In June of 2000, Stephanie was diagnosed with melanoma skin cancer on her face, a mole that had developed during her 3rd pregnancy. The next 2 years were filled with experimental therapies and endless surgeries as they cut her face off 1 inch at a time until there was nothing left to cut. The pain she was experiencing was unimaginable, and the nausea was so severe that it became difficult for her to eat. That was when a doctor at the hospital pulled me aside and told me that Stephanie might benefit from using marijuana. At the time, we didn't consider it an acceptable option. I was strongly opposed to the use of marijuana, and my home had always been drug-free. Moreover, the consequences associated with marijuana's illegal status were frightening. After Stephanie's 10th surgery, I'm on the wrong page, excuse me. All efforts to save her life had failed, and her oncologists predicted that she had about 6 months to live. As her tumors continued to grow, her whole body was racked with continuous and uncontrollable pain. No matter how much OxyContin or oxycodone she took, it provided her little to no relief. Extreme nausea was resulting in dangerously rapid weight loss, and anti-nausea medications, including Marinol, a synthetic form of THC, one of the active chemicals in marijuana, simply did not work. At that point, my other adult children begged me to let Stephanie use marijuana. When I refused, they took her out of my home so that she could use it. When she came back 3 days later, she looked better than I had seen her in months. Whereas she'd been eating nothing for days, she was eating 3 meals a day then, using marijuana, and keeping the food down. And for reasons I don't know, marijuana also seemed to enhance the effects of her pain medication without making her feel high. When that doctor first suggested Stephanie use medical marijuana, my fear of being caught was too significant to overcome. But once I saw how much relief it provided my suffering daughter, I was willing to risk everything, including going to jail. I would rather have spent the rest of my life in prison than deny her the medicine that helped her to live for 89 more days. I don't use drugs. I don't abuse alcohol. I'm a veteran, I'm a mother, and I'm a great-grandmother. I've raised 4 children, and I'm now raising the children my daughter had to leave behind. As a lifelong volunteer, I have dedicated a large portion of my own life to helping people stay clean and drug-free. But I saw with my own eyes that for medical purposes, marijuana works. People say that there is no greater loss than when a parent loses their child, and they are right. I lost my mother 3 weeks after my daughter, and my husband 6 months after my mother. Neither of them used marijuana because they didn't need it. At this point, nothing can be done for me, and nothing can be done for my daughter. But there is something that can be done for those families across Minnesota that are currently dealing with similar situations. We need merely to open our eyes and see their pain, even if it isn't as obvious as in Stephanie's case. They deserve compassion, dignity, and honor. And that is what this bill will provide. I thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I'm Representative Carly Melin, and thank you to Ms. Whiting for sharing her very touching and emotional story. It's a good reminder to all of us that the proposed legislation to use medical marijuana is not about politics. It's about people, and it's about the families that this could benefit here in Minnesota. I'm honored to be standing here with my colleagues to propose medical marijuana legislation here in Minnesota to help Minnesotans that are suffering from very serious illnesses, such as Ms. Whiting's daughter was suffering from, and to help ease their pain. This legislation will allow Minnesota residents with qualifying medical conditions, such as cancer and MS, to no longer face legal penalties for possessing up to a small amount of marijuana. Patients will require recommendations from a medical professional with the power to prescribe medications, such as their physician, to legally obtain and use marijuana with a state-issued ID. With these ID cards, patients will be afforded legal, safe, and consistent access to medical marijuana via nonprofit medical marijuana dispensaries that will be tightly regulated by the State Department of Health. And the number of dispensaries is limited and subject to licensure and inspection by the Commissioner of Health. This legislation strikes the appropriate balance between compassion, health, and safety. It protects and provides relief to some of our state's most vulnerable citizens, and it does in a manner that is well-regulated and well-controlled. I think that, after hearing Ms. Whiting's story, and I've heard from a number of constituents who have watched their family members die in extreme pain and turmoil, this is a matter of compassionate care. This is allowing doctors, physicians to decide when their patients can benefit from medical marijuana. And we're doing it in a very well-regulated fashion. And I hope that we can move forward from this and continue to hear from families and have their support through this process. And I want to thank my colleagues for being here today. And now you'll hear from Representative Tom Hackbarth.
Thank you, Carly, and thank you, Ms. Whiting. And thank you all for coming today. This is not a partisan issue, and believe it or not, the Republicans have a heart and they have compassion as well. The reason I'm here today and the reason I support this bill, and I have for a long time now, I was a co-author on the bill in 2009, and it's a matter of the quality of life in your final days for me. I've had a lot of friends that have been in this particular position, and maybe some of you know that my wife is terminal at this point. And it's all about quality of life. Quality of life is so important. I've been talking to a number of my wife's doctors, and that's what we've been striving for, is a quality of life. There's been a number of different issues that my wife is facing. I thought that we might be losing her about a month and a half ago, and with some pacemaker installed and some other medications that she's taking, she's done a huge turnaround. She's still terminal, but the quality of life has improved so much. She's not smoking marijuana, and I don't think she'll need to, but quality of life is what it's all about, and that's what we're talking about here in those final days. And it's good for other issues, MS, etc., but for me, it's those final days that you face and the quality of life that we need to have for these patients. So we'd stand for questions if you have questions. Anybody else want to say a few words?
We always hear when this comes up from the people who veto these bills or choose not to support them that they're waiting for the support of law enforcement. What efforts have you made to get law enforcement on board with this?
Well, I would say in that regard, I have a high respect for law enforcement. Actually, my dad and brother are both in law enforcement. I'm an attorney. None of us are trained in the medical field. I think that we should leave making medical decisions up to doctors, not to law enforcement. So that's where I'm at with it right now. I think that this is going to be one of the most restrictive laws in the country. It's going to be very well regulated. Very limited scope on the dispensaries and which patients even qualify for medical marijuana. I think that should concern or alleviate a lot of concerns of law enforcement. Will it alleviate all of them? Maybe not, but I do think that medical decisions should be left up to physicians.
Is there a difference between what you're proposing and what they've made law in, let's say, Colorado, where they're threatened by a federal injunction there?
This, as I stated, I do believe will be one of the most restrictive laws in the country. The dispensaries will be limited to one dispensary in each county in greater Minnesota, 3 in Hennepin County, 2 in Ramsey County. So there'll be very limited places where you're actually able to obtain the medical marijuana. From my understanding, the federal government hasn't enforced drug laws against states that are using medical marijuana properly, except in a few instances, such as in California. This legislation is not like what California has. We want to make that very clear that this is a pretty limited scope of which patients would qualify.
Describe the product for us, if you could. Would the marijuana be grown at like a federally regulated facility or a state-regulated facility? Would it even be produced in Minnesota, or is this a product that you get from out of state?
I might have to divert to somebody else to answer that question on. I know that it will be regulated by the State Commissioner of Health, but if somebody else wants to answer more thoroughly.
Sure, I can do that. Yes, the Commissioner of Health will have discretion to determine exactly how many dispensaries will be licensed and regulated around the state. There's a very small number that he's required to establish. He has discretion to establish more beyond that. So the marijuana would be grown locally here in Minnesota at state licensed dispensaries that are well regulated.
Are you guys concerned at all about pressure from the DEA?
No. No. The DEA has very limited law enforcement resources. They do not typically come into states and arrest and prosecute individuals, especially patients and their caregivers, who are using marijuana pursuant to a doctor's recommendation. They simply do not have the resources to do that.
Do you think you have the votes in the legislature? I mean, this is a legislature that can't even legalize wine in the grocery stores. Do you think there's support for marijuana dispensaries in the Minnesota legislature?
Yeah, I think there is. We passed this bill in 2009 and sent it to the governor, and the governor vetoed it. I've not polled this legislature, but I think we've got support in the legislature to pass it, and that's why we're introducing the bill now. We've been facing the budget issue over the last entire session, and we're introducing it now so we can gain support, talk to legislators, and then really hit it hard, hit the ground running when session starts next year. So that's the goal, get people on board and talk about it over the summer. And I think we're going to gain a lot of support both on the Republican side and the DFL side.
Does it help that other states have begun passing similar laws?
I think it helps, yeah. Since 2009, I think that's changed things a little bit. You know, when I'm out door knocking, no one ever brings it up. If they do bring it up, it's people that are in support. And it's a good thing. I've gotten a number of emails just before session started, just maybe November, December, people asking me where I stood on it and if we were going to be bringing a bill forward.
Preliminary conversations have you had with the governor to move him off his stated opposition to this?
Well, as Representative Hackbarth just said, you know, we're just introducing it right now to get the discussion going. Right now, you know, we are focusing on the budget. This is more something we're going to be pursuing next legislative session. I know that Governor Dayton has had concerns in the past, and those have been aligned with law enforcement. I think that he's an open person, and he's going to be willing to listen to the families, such as Ms. Whiting, who described how this really helped her daughter. And like I said, I've heard from a number of constituents who've had to watch their family members suffer and who really feel like this would have been beneficial to them. And I think that the governor is certainly open to listening to those stories over the next year.
Does anyone have a guess how many people would take advantage of this, assuming it would become law? Are we talking about dozens of people or hundreds of people? Or,
well, as I said, because of the limited scope, you know, the estimate is that it would probably only be a few thousand people. You know, they'd have to have a chronic illness, such as a severe chronic illness, such as cancer or MS, and their doctor would have to make the assessment that this sort of medication would be appropriate or beneficial to them. So I think that, you know, in that regard, we're probably only talking about a few thousand people statewide.
How does that work? Does the doctor have to write a prescription?
Yes, the doctor would have to write a prescription, just as a doctor writes a prescription for medication now.
Joni, can we ask you another question real quick? When you hear the concerns about can you go up to the microphone? When you hear concerns about law enforcement and those types of things standing in the way, is that frustrating to you as a parent?
Very much so, and it makes me want to talk to them in person. It makes me want to show them the picture of my daughter and ask them, do they even have any idea what kind of pain we're talking about that helps the people that suffer from these diseases? They have no idea. My daughter wore her pain on her face, as you saw. But when you cover it up, nobody sees how bad it is. It's bad. I've actually spoken to a number of law enforcement officers. Last time I testified was for the Justice Committee, and they had a lot of police officers there and a lot of like commissioner people that are in high places in law enforcement. And to my face, they all said, we wouldn't have arrested you. But they shouldn't have arrested anybody that's in my shoes or my daughter's shoes.
What would you say to the governor if you had a chance to talk to him about his concerns about law enforcement?
I say he's the governor and that he should lead. That's what I say. I say that it's his responsibility to lead, and then it's law enforcement's responsibility to do what he says. And if I don't see any difference between my doctor or my daughter's doctor prescribing me cocaine through oxycodone than cannabis, you know, that someone can use. If it helps them, it helps them. We had no idea. She got Marinol. My daughter got Marinol. It's THC. And it did absolutely nothing for my daughter. It was only from her smoking it that it released some chemical that helped her. And it did keep her alive for another 89 days. It helped her to be able to eat for 89 more days. Munchies, I don't know what you want to call it. But it worked. And I stand before you to give you that testimony. It worked. and we should not be denying it to anybody. And if I could talk to the governor myself, I would be more than happy to. And any law enforcement officer, I would be happy to talk to them and try and help them figure out a way to make this legal for the people that need it. That's just where I'm at. Thank you, sir.
Somebody told us that the University of Minnesota already is authorized to dispense medical marijuana, but has never used that authority. Does anyone know anything about that?
No, but I would like to add that we would like to work with law enforcement. If law enforcement has some issues with the bill, please come and help us address those issues. We want to work with law enforcement to get these things straightened out.
I'm not going away.
How soon could people get a state ID card if the law passes?
After enactment, the Department of Health will have a few months to establish rules for the program. Once those rules are established and they begin accepting applications, it will probably be another couple of months before cards will be issued.
Any idea when dispensaries would open up?
What we've seen in other states is there is a significant delay in the dispensing system. Between the commissioner having to between the commissioner having to devise rules for the program, get these guys licensed and running. He'll be using a competitive bidding process to determine who will be granted a registration certificate to operate a dispensary. So there will take some time there to sort through all of that.
Anything else? Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good touch.
Again, you were just watching a news conference announcing the intention to pursue legalizing medical marijuana in the state. Senator Scott Dibble will carry the legislation in the Senate, Representative Carly Melin in the House.